While the world was watching America and China battle for global dominance, something extraordinary was happening quietly across Africa. A new revolution, not of protests, not of politics, but of construction. Across the continent, the ground was shaking, not from conflict, but from progress. Steel meeting soil, concrete replacing dust, and dreams turning into skylines. In just over a decade, Africa has activated over $5 trillion worth of infrastructure projects, railways that cross nations, ports that rival Singapore, highways stretching thousands of kilometers, and cities rising from scratch. And yet, the West barely noticed. Because this time, it's not about aid. It's about ownership. It's about a new generation of African nations that are no longer waiting for permission to build their future. For the first time in modern history, Africa is designing, financing, and constructing its own tomorrow on its own terms. And the world's old powers? They can't compete. Decades ago, the story was different. For over half a century, Africa's potential was defined by outsiders. Colonial systems designed the roads that extracted, not connected. Ports were built to export resources, not import prosperity. Railways were drawn to serve empires, not economies. And when the old systems crumbled, a new form of control arrived: financial colonialism. Loans, conditions, and endless development projects that built more debt than infrastructure. For years, the narrative was simple: Africa can't develop without the West. But somewhere in the early 2000s, that story began to change. African leaders started asking a new question: what if we built for ourselves? What if the roads, ports, and bridges weren't designed for exports, but for empowerment? What if the future wasn't imported, but engineered locally? That question gave birth to a movement. And within 2 decades, it became a continental awakening. A building boom so vast that the global balance of power could no longer ignore it. Because when Africa builds, the world economy shifts. Let's begin in the East, where the first sparks of this transformation began. In Kenya, a once modest port city called Mombasa became the gateway to a new era. The standard gauge railway connected Mombasa to Nairobi, a project that slashed travel time, boosted trade, and became a symbol of what modern Africa could do. From there, the tracks extended to Uganda, Rwanda, and South Sudan, a transnational corridor of commerce. In Ethiopia, one of the fastest growing economies in the world, the Addis Ababa Djibouti Railway became a lifeline of trade, connecting a landlocked nation to global markets through the Red Sea. This wasn't charity. This was strategy. Each railway, each bridge, each highway, a statement. Africa is not a destination for aid. It's a hub of ambition. Then came the megaprojects that stunned even the skeptics. The LAPSSET Corridor, a $25 billion project linking Kenya, Ethiopia, and South Sudan through ports, pipelines, rail, and roads. The Lekki Deep Sea Port in Nigeria, one of the largest and most advanced in all of West Africa, capable of handling 1.2 million containers a year. The Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, rebuilt to world-class standards, transforming Nigeria's busiest trade route. And in Morocco, the Tangier Med Port, now one of the largest in the Mediterranean, outpacing European giants in shipping volume. Each one of these was a message to the world: the era of dependency is over. Africa is open for business, on its own terms. But roads and ports were just the beginning. Across the continent, new cities began to rise. In Egypt, the government launched the new administrative capital, a $60 billion project designed to decongest Cairo and house over 6 million people, complete with Africa's tallest skyscraper. In Kenya, Konza Technopolis, Africa's Silicon Savannah, began to take shape, envisioned as a hub for innovation, AI, and digital enterprise. In Nigeria, Eco-Atlantic City emerged from reclaimed ocean land, a futuristic city built to withstand rising seas and redefine African urban living. And in Rwanda, Kigali Innovation City became a symbol of what modern African design and efficiency look like: clean, green, and globally connected. These are not vanity projects. They are economic arteries, the roads, rails, and cities that pump life into a new era of African trade. But the West still asks, who's funding it? The old assumption is that someone else must be paying, that Africa can't finance Africa. That assumption is wrong, because this time, Much of the money isn't coming from the IMF or the World Bank. It's coming from within Africa itself, from sovereign wealth funds in Botswana and Nigeria, from Afreximbank, the African Finance Corporation, and local pension funds investing directly in infrastructure, from partnerships that treat Africa not as a client, but as a collaborator. And yes, from new global players, nations that see Africa not as a charity case, but as a strategic partner. The West can't compete because its approach never changed. It still offers loans tied to politics, conditions tied to control, and promises tied to bureaucracy. But Africa doesn't need permission anymore. It needs partners, and it's finding them elsewhere. Look at the scale again. $5 trillion in active and planned projects. That's not a slogan. That's data. Thousands of kilometers of new railways. Dozens of new international airports. Billions invested in renewable energy grids and intercontinental highways connecting Cairo to Cape Town. The Trans-African Highway Network, once just a dream, is now under construction, connecting 10 major corridors across 54 nations. Imagine driving from Lagos to Nairobi, or from Durban to Cairo, uninterrupted, on African-built roads. That's not science fiction. It's already happening. And the real power? It's not just in what's being built. It's who is building it. For the first time in modern history, African engineers, architects, and developers are leading many of these projects. Young Africans, educated at home and abroad, returning to design the cities their parents never got to live in. Across the continent, homegrown innovation is replacing dependency. Construction firms from Kenya, Egypt, South Africa, and Nigeria are now winning bids once reserved for European conglomerates. The West may have built Africa's first railways, but Africa is building its own future, faster, smarter, and stronger. This is not the Africa of charity telethons and endless debt talks. This is an Africa that builds bridges, ports, and power stations, because it has no intention of being left behind in the 21st century. And for the global powers that once controlled its destiny, that realization is terrifying, because every new railway, every new port, every new bridge is one less reason for Africa to depend on the West. For decades, the story of Africa's development was written in other people's offices. The boardrooms of Washington, London, and Paris decided what Africa needed and how it should pay for it. But that era is fading fast. Today, new alliances are reshaping the foundation of power. Africa isn't waiting for the next IMF loan. It's signing its own deals through BRICS, Afreximbank, and intra-African investment platforms. From Cairo to Cape Town, a quiet financial revolution has begun, one where African money is building African infrastructure. And that, more than any port or bridge, is what truly terrifies the West. For the first time in modern history, the flow of money is reversing. Africa is no longer borrowing just to survive, it's investing to lead. Billions of dollars from African pension funds, sovereign wealth, and private capital are being pooled into continental megaprojects. The African Finance Corporation alone has financed over 35 projects worth billions across power, transport, and telecoms. Afreximbank, headquartered in Cairo, is building trade finance systems that rival Western models, enabling cross-border trade without relying on the U.S. dollar. And then, there's BRICS, the new global alliance of emerging economies, where Africa holds a front-row seat. Through BRICS, African nations are securing financing for long-term infrastructure without the political strings of the past. Low-interest loans, local currency deals, and joint ventures are replacing the old cycle of debt and dependency. This is not just economic progress, it's financial sovereignty. Meanwhile, the West is watching in disbelief. For years, Western governments assumed that Africa would always need their approval, that no major project could move forward without their institutions. But as new partnerships form, those same nations now find themselves locked out of the conversation. When African leaders meet to discuss trade, energy, and logistics, the question isn't, what will the West allow? It's, how can we connect Lagos to Luanda? How can we trade from Dakar to Dar es Salaam? The priorities have shifted from pleasing donors to building destiny. Western analysts often label this as a threat. They call it debt diplomacy, geopolitical expansion, or Chinese influence. But on the ground, for millions of Africans, it feels very different. It feels like freedom. Freedom to build without waiting. freedom to plan without permission, freedom to connect across borders that were drawn by colonial rulers, not by the people who live there. This is what happens when a continent stops asking for help and starts building its own network of power. Every bridge, every tunnel, every port is a declaration of independence. Each one whispers the same message to the world. We are no longer the world's extraction point. We are the world's expansion point. The numbers tell the story better than any slogan. Over 25,000 kilometers of new railways under construction. More than 200 new industrial parks being developed. Hundreds of new power plants, from solar to hydro, coming online across Africa. In Nigeria, the second Niger Bridge finally connected regions that had waited generations for unity. In Egypt, Benban Solar Park became one of the largest in the world, proving Africa can lead in clean energy. In Morocco, the Noor Solar Complex powers millions of homes and exports energy across continents. And in South Africa, the GO-Train, Africa's first high-speed rail, redefined what urban mobility can look like. Each of these projects is more than an engineering feat. It's a symbol that the continent once underestimated is now outpacing the old powers in ambition. And yet, the most important transformation is not physical, it's psychological. For the first time in generations, Africans are seeing what's possible. Children grow up watching new airports rise, not just hearing about aid programs. Young engineers design smart cities instead of leaving to work abroad. Entrepreneurs build factories instead of waiting for imports. That shift, from waiting to creating, is what changes nations forever. The world's narrative about Africa is collapsing under the weight of evidence. No longer this sleeping giant. Africa is now the world's fastest urbanizing region, home to 10 of the 20 fastest growing economies. And unlike the industrial revolutions that built Europe and America, this one is being powered by connectivity, energy, and technology, not colonial exploitation. The infrastructure boom is not just connecting cities, it's connecting futures. But make no mistake, this rise doesn't mean the journey is over. Challenges remain: corruption, debt mismanagement, political instability, and environmental threats. Yet, even with those struggles, the momentum is unstoppable. Because this time, the foundation is solid, literally and figuratively. Once a road is built, it stays. Once a bridge connects two economies, it doesn't ask for permission to keep trading. And once a young generation sees that Africa can build world-class systems, there's no going back to dependency. As the West grapples with inflation, shrinking growth, and aging infrastructure, Africa is expanding, building, and preparing. By 2050, Africa's population will surpass 2.5 billion, a workforce larger than India's and China's combined. And this generation isn't just working for the world, it's rebuilding it. When you connect 54 nations with roads, rails, and energy, you don't just move goods, you move power. You create the backbone of a new global economy, one not controlled by old empires or multinational monopolies, but by the continent that was once written off as a resource pit. Now, it's becoming the world's growth engine. In the West, it can't compete, not because it lacks money, but because it lacks vision. It spent decades investing in control, not connection. In extraction, not expansion. In ownership, not partnership. Africa's builders are doing the opposite. They're building to unite, not divide. That's why the $5 trillion wave of infrastructure isn't just a construction story. It's a civilization story. It's the foundation of a new global balance. A generation ago, Africa was told to wait its turn. Now, it's no longer waiting. Ports are humming, trains are running, cities are rising, and the world is finally looking south, not out of pity, but out of respect. Because when the dust settles and the concrete dries, history will remember this moment not as charity, but as the awakening of a continent. The West built empires with ships. Africa is building its future with rails. And this time, no one can stop it.